Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Occult podcast, the podcast where we do, or at least talk about inadvisable things in the name of magical science. Your hosts, as always, are Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
This is Felix S. Warren, just here, regular, in my own body that I came with.
Present and accounted for.
Everything on the outside matches what's on the inside.
You can judge a book by its cover in this case.
Today,
right now.
in this moment. So,
Yes.
And we know on this podcast, if you've ever been here before, that that's not always the case. That you can't guarantee that I'm going to have the same person in as you might assume by the external.
Also, me neither. I mean, usually I am the one to sort of play interviewer, but there's been a few times where, even last episode where someone else has been in. So, yeah, you can't even judge my book by its cover.
Yeah.
Wahaha.
I feel that this is actually the norm for all living beings, maybe even inanimate objects. I basically think anybody can be, what people usually say, possessed.
Mm-hmm.
Our guest today has been calling it occupied.
Mm-hmm.
Hence did you put occupy bodies?
Yeah.
I love it. That was, yeah. I think
Fuck Occupy Wall Street. Just go straight for the bodies.
Right? Just occupy the bodies, and then you'll be occupying Wall Street in those bodies, and you'll have their wallets to spend.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is, would you say this is kind of a taboo subject?
Very much so.
And so it's in so many directions, because on the one hand, it's just kind of spooky scary to consider. On the other hand, like, this is similar to stuff that, like, for instance, some very evangelical Christians will say, like, demons are doing, and that's why there are gay people, because they're possessed by demons that are in love with each other.
Yes. And forces the humans to therefore be in love.
Yeah.
It's also similar to conversations that I've heard in, like, the DID, Otherkin, Therian communities, where it's talking about altars.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, so it can really... excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
It can really cross over into a lot of areas. And it can make a lot of different people uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I guess, if this is the sort of thing that makes you uncomfortable, this whole podcast, this whole episode is really going to probably be in that zone. And maybe just listen to what it is that our guest has to say on the subject, because he's not really here to say who's right about any particular belief structure. He's really more going to be talking about, like, just how to live good.
Yeah. And I mean, like, talked about it a couple of episodes ago when we thought this was going to be the next episode.
Yeah.
But, like, there are things related to, like, day-to-day life that we do differently. Felix and I do differently because we have this kind of relationship.
Like, well, and our guest is another one of those that's been part of my life for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, like, my life, the life that I live when I'm in this body is affected by, like, my guest's life. Like, our guest's life that he comes over here a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And usually in my body. And he does stuff. Like, he has a whole life. He contributes to blogs. He does, like, I keep on saying he does stuff, but it's kind of hard not to emphasize that, because like, I've had a lot of trouble doing stuff.
Yeah.
And he comes and he does it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's just like the net positive that's happening with that, but there's also, like, I mean, I live with him even though we're not here at the same time, and you live with him.
Yeah.
Sometimes he is actually here at the same time. And so, like, I have to organize for him. Like, allow for him being here. Like, if I know he's going to be here later in the day, I got to make sure not to party so hard that he can't do anything by the time he gets here.
And I mean, that's the same for any of the entities that we have this sort of like connection relationship with. Like, try to be cognizant of the fact that like we are sharing our lives, you know, our bodies, our energy with them. And that means that like we can't go out on a big old walk, you know, randomly on, I mean, it's the same thing as having other kind of responsibilities. Like we would not plan a walk to the park on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
Specifically because we have this at night. And it's sort of the similar considerations for like, okay, so-and-so is going to be down like in one of our bodies and they have this, and this going on. Even if it's just like temporary, like we still try to consider how we plan the day, you know? Excuse me.
Yeah. I really want to speak specifically about our guest simply
Yeah.
because he's going to be, like, coming on.
Yeah.
And kind of talking about, well, the end of things that our guest experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, so for this particular one, it really does feel like two sides of the same door.
Mm-hmm.
Like...
Yeah, because you two have been collaborating.
He's been sneaking in since before... He really has. Like, he has been sneaking into my life since before you met me.
Yeah.
And you were part of how I really became aware that he was around because he was trying to stay a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to acknowledge this. There are some entities, some people, who will try to just stay a secret because they think it's simpler that way than you knowing fully about them. And people can come from a lot of different backgrounds and have a lot of different situations that they go back to whenever they leave your body or your
Right.
space or whatever. And so, like, I've really had to learn this, like, over time. Sometimes it's been hard to hear things like, no, I don't want you to draw my face.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you've been someone who's been drawing spirits that have shown up in your life since you were like...
since ever.
Yeah, since you could grab the pencils. So, to have someone, like, basically tell you that, no, I don't want my face drawn is, like, notable.
Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to really understand that because sometimes I thought it was like, they have, like, spirits, angels, and such that, like, are like, no, don't want depictions of my visage or whatever.
Right.
And with this, it was just more on the level of, like, really, no, I don't want my face seen.
It's
I
like
don't think
people
it's safe.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one that I would get that with, but it was like, oh man, like, it's been really interesting having other people on the other side of the veil from me because sometimes I only get to know them to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's practicality and sometimes it's just like, they've got their own lives.
Yeah.
Like I don't tell everything to everybody either.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like this last year has really been us trying to take this spirit stuff and really like say like
I don't want to say take it seriously, but like actually try to integrate it into our lives.
Well, just like integrate it into the reality that's around us, into physical reality. Like say, okay, well then what's really going on here? Like I feel like before I wasn't really bothering to really keep track of what was going on with them.
Yeah.
Like moment to moment. And sometimes it was too confusing for me to do so, and so I just didn't. But then it started to be like, okay, before I thought you were kind of a wispy spirit existing in limitless time. Well, like limitless time, so there's like no cause and effect and before and after.
Yeah.
But, I started to pick up over time that they're experiencing time. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, what's going on with you? Oh, you're a real person with stuff. Like, because there's the other assumption is that spirits don't have stuff. They're just in the ether, and they don't have, like, they don't need material items because they're beyond the material plane. It's like,
right.
They're not here in the room with you physically in the same way that you are there physically, but that doesn't mean they don't have stuff somewhere.
Yeah.
And once I got around the idea, it's like, these are people with identities.
Yes.
And stuff.
Yes.
Like, starting from there, everything built out logically.
Yeah.
Just trying to remember, like, who are you? What do you do? What is your stuff? Like, other identity things that they're willing to say. And if they're not, then, like, I've, like, learned it's not just about respecting that because of a sense of respect for someone else, but there is a
reason.
There usually is a reason. And sometimes, it's been like, hey, I get that you might not want us to, like, I get you that you have that rule, but,
right.
Like, I've kind of noticed that, like, are things going okay with you?
Right.
Is, like...
And it's something that, like, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about this kind of, like, I don't know if I want to call it, like, behind the scenes or just, like, the nuts and bolts of this kind of stuff. But, like, people have been talking about when they first started interacting with you, Felix. And one of the things that a lot of people said is that you actually cared about them beyond what the grimoire or the whatever, the Wikipedia article, the tome that you found ominously glowing at the bottom of a pit.
A lot of magicians are taught these techniques simply so that they can get something and then leave. And so the mindset that usually you're taught to have is, like, when you walk away from this ritual, you don't really need to be concerned with what happens to the spirit afterwards. Like, what is their... where are they going to go? What are they going to do?
mean,
if you do have a continued relationship, there's that. But, like, there's no respect for their actual existence.
I have an analogy for this.
Sure.
Imagine each goetic demon is a bank.
Oh boy.
You go in, you tell the teller what you want, and they tell you what the price is or whatever. Like, exchange of goods and services. You don't care about the teller.
Right.
But, like...
But that's Roxanne. And she's got a daughter and 2 cats.
Mm-hmm.
And every Thursday, she brings a new kind of candy. So, like, that's how I am with them.
Yeah.
And, I think you've noticed that pretty much everywhere that I go that I'm a regular, I'm like this with everyone.
Yes.
I, like, talk about this every single shop that I go to. I'm like, oh, yeah, so-and-so that we usually see behind the counter? I said hi to them.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I recognize them. Actually, one of the things that I've gotten commentary on is that I recognize them. And so, like, paying attention to certain quirks of identity, not just about what they look like face-wise, because sometimes that's a projection, but just consistent things about them, maybe different sayings they have, different things that they like.
Yeah.
Just offhand stuff.
Gestures.
They don't notice.
Yes.
They really, and often they don't understand even that I can pick up on that until I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's sort of a combination of far-seeing and telepathy.
I think everybody can get it. It's just that I've been able to interpret where it's coming from. And also, there's some sort of freak out that happens with a lot of, I would say, earthlings. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, like, oh, I'm communicating with a real person of some sort, or at least some sort of thinking entity. There's usually like a thought bomb right after that of, oh shit, what does this mean? And I either got rid of that, I maybe let that off whenever I was 13, or I just don't really get it to any extent that other people do.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, it's incredibly interesting how, I mean, It's incredibly interesting how little details you can pick up even when you're just like telepathically talking with someone in your head. You know?
Like, it's a very different type of communication and conversation. You have to keep track of a lot in your head that usually you can look at or get in a different type of memory. Like, there's the memory that records all the things that you hear with your actual ears.
Mm-hmm.
And the memory that is telepathy is really more thought associated.
Yeah.
Or it, like, if you're looking at, like, a river whenever you hear the telepathy in your head, whenever you receive the telepathy, then the memory might get attached to your seeing your visuals of the river and your experience of the river.
Yeah.
Like, it often attaches it to the memory, to the sensations, the sense memory that you're having around you.
Right. So we're talking about as people who are native to, you know, who, for lack of a better word, own the body that we're in.
Yeah.
Experiencing, like, interacting with someone who is not native to the body.
Yeah. And so sometimes I will get, like, just their thoughts. Sometimes I really do get a sense of where they are and what's going on with them. Often that's turned into stories. We've been reading a lot of those lately. I think this is quite a lot of people on Tumblr's Blorbos are situations like this. And for a while, these people were just my Blorbo. Yeah. Like, it's another way that I wasn't necessarily taking them seriously. Because I didn't know that I could. Yeah. And they didn't even know that...
You thought they were just paper dolls.
Yeah. Like, and some of them were aware that I was writing stories or drawing or whatever, and they're like, oh, okay, that's cute. And so the seriousness lately has been, like, actually having an open dialogue of saying, like, I am conscious of you, I notice you, do you notice me? And having the back and forth like that. Right. And that's really been what's been key to be able to do this body sharing experience. Yes. Because otherwise it's complete chaos.
I mean, like, honesty and trust. Yeah. Is also two very big components of it. Because, like, I'm sure our guest and I will talk about some of the stuff later. But, like, whether or not it's conscious or unconscious, someone else having control of your body basically has control of your government identity, access to your job, access to your email, access to your biometrics, like,
they're a doppelganger. Mm-hmm. The scariest kind, because there's only one of you. Yeah. But they're still your double.
But something behind the eyes is different.
And you're not there to make it undo, because they got your body. Like, it sounds like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Pod People, all that stuff. Those are actually a pretty good cautionary tale on this. Yeah. Now, the reality of the situation is, I would say that he spent most of the time that he snuck in keeping me safe or employed.
Yeah, safe, sane, and employed.
Just not experiencing the situation that he was experiencing on the other end at the time.
Which, I mean, in some cases is an escape from what they're dealing with. Yeah.
Well, on that
note,
I'm going to escape from this podcast.
Felix hits the eject button. Right the fuck now.
And he's going to come in here and
talk about himself.
Yep.
Cool.
Later.
Bye. So Felix is doing the switching thing. Switching up stuff. And then our guest is getting settled in.
0.
There we go. Doing his 3 steps like we're all supposed to. Otherwise, Mantis is going to appear from the ether and yell at us. All right. So, your picture is up.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. I drew this one, so it's no surprise to me. Yes.
First time of you drawing your own, or like someone drawing their own, I think. Besides, I don't know, did Felix draw his own?
Yes.
Yes, Felix drew his own, but first time for the guests to draw their own, I believe. So,
Yeah.
welcome.
Hey.
So, we always have questions for the newcomers. First off, what do we call ya?
I am Edward.
Welcome, Edward.
That is a pseudonym. I'll be very clear.
Obviously. And then gender identity.
He, his. I mean, we've been blowing that all over the place today, I think.
mean, I even said your name in a couple of podcasts before now, so neither of those should be a surprise. Where are you hailing from?
Oh, yeah. So I'm coming out of Mageville.
Mm-hmm.
Same place as a few other people. And right now I'm basically just on cat watch.
You're on cat watch.
I'm on cat watch.
You have cats?
I do. I don't want to talk too much about them.
I know.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that we're friends is because you're a fellow cat person.
Yes, absolutely.
Cats.
I love them so much. It's a shame we can't have them here on the podcast, but they're too disruptive.
All cats are too disruptive. But,
it's true.
Like, I can't imagine how disruptive Mageville's cats would be. Considering, like, Mage is in the name. So, and then, what do you do?
I'm a parapsychologist.
Ooh.
So, sorry, I backed up from the mic a little bit.
It's okay.
And it's an interesting field to be in. Actually, I say parapsychology because this is a Earth podcast.
Yeah.
But in some places that I've been, it's simply psychology.
Ah.
The para part is wrapped up into psychology. It's all packaged in. Mm-hmm. And in some places they don't get psychology at all, and they're like, "Well, you just want to like talk about what I think? Well, that's crazy. Why don't we just pop off some fireballs or something?"
Yeah, sounds like Mageville isn't much on the psychology end of things.
Not much on the thought end of things.
Oh my god.
But
yeah,
I did want to explain my portrait.
Cool.
So some of us do not want to share our image. Felix talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a good grasp of what my face looks like. I don't tend to send that, and he, I don't know exactly how Felix's memory of faces works, but I've gotten the sense that if someone doesn't want them to know what it is that they look like, he does not actually get that impression.
Yeah.
I'm a little paranoid. And a lot of us will be, and by us I mean like the people who kind of show up from the other side of things.
Yeah.
I have like some pretty good associations with the gas mask. I do a lot of art with it.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to make that one look kind of like it had alien eyes to show solidarity with the space people. And it kind of got there.
Yeah. I think it's cute.
Thank you.
So.
But I just look like a regular human person. Like, just so you know, I'm not hiding anything.
Okay. No.
I can't wear a big face covering mask entirely and then say I'm
I was
not hiding
say,
anything.
Like,
but
you just have one eye in the middle of your face, but then I realized that like the gas mask would make it impossible to see.
I am actually this paranoid about face scanning technology.
Ah.
That's a weird quirk of mine.
Huh. So. Well, but we're here not to talk about face masks and your life in Mageville and your cats. We're here to talk about the fact that you're here.
I am.
You're in Felix's body.
I got here.
And what the fuck are you doing in there?
I've been here for a while. And so we had to talk about this several times. It got weird several times over because it's such a strange reality churning experience to have another person across from you have a completely different personality and memory and set of behaviors. And you had that several times with the Felix that you married and deserved to have as your husband. He became me.
And several other people.
But I just want to talk about what I'm responsible for. Like, he would become me without any warning to him or you and any control over it, and you would just have to deal with it. And sometimes I would be completely uncognizant of this because I was often having a subconscious experience of it. My apologies. Like
I honestly think that I've argued with you before about the fact that Felix needed to quit his job. Not realizing that I wasn't arguing with Felix, I was arguing with you.
Yeah. And, oh my gosh. Yeah, so I did show up at Felix's day job back whenever he did have a day job. It was a high pressure software engineering job, I would call it. So basically, I've been kind of showing up in Felix since he was a child. And it basically just so happened that at a time whenever he would have, like, his life was in danger, I was also kind of blipping out psychically and managed to be like, I guess I'm in this kid's body and I'd better make sure that he stays alive. He experienced a life-threatening accident at that time.
Yeah.
So after that, it was basically a combination of, I'd better stick around and make sure he's okay. Holy crap. Because this was the accident that injured his brain.
Right.
And for a while he just couldn't move around. And then it was like, well, it's actually kind of nice over here. And I mean, I kind of come from both ends of the spectrum when it comes to either what some people would just call helpful spirit and baneful spirit.
Yeah.
In that I've been a little greedy sometimes. Sometimes I've just been coming in because I didn't want to be where I was.
Right.
And sometimes I just wanted to make sure that I didn't, in quotations, lose Felix.
Right.
I was afraid of not being able to come over anymore, so sometimes I would just, like, come in for a few moments, be like, okay, yeah, still same.
Still connected.
Okay, bye. Day job was actually pretty easy to help with for a while.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too much in the weeds of what exactly happened, but I do want to give an example of what can happen.
Yeah.
And with Felix, the reasons why this persisted for so long, one, it's very hard to remember that someone's been over in your body doing routine tasks.
Right.
Especially if they're incredibly routine. I mean, do you really care what your memories of doing the dishes were like?
Yeah.
For the listener at home, I would like you to entertain the idea that a chore that you do every day, someone else has been doing for you all this time via some sort of, like, mental link, and you're just not aware of it. How do you think you would even notice?
Right.
How much of that do you actually consciously think about? Do you think you would actually notice that being done by someone else? I invite that as a thought experiment.
Yep.
And I don't want to creep you out. I don't want to creep anyone out. It's actually pretty normal for me.
Yeah.
Some of this is just like, it's my trade, and some of it is just a life experience that I've been having for a long enough time at this point that, like, it became my weird little normal.
Right.
And, like, I know that there's other people who experience this.
Yes, but it's very hard to find people who will talk about it that don't, like, sort of veer into, I would say, psychological boxes that they try to put people in.
Yeah,
like,
trying to break out the DSM.
Yeah, DSM-5, or talk about it in, like, spiritual terms, or, like, theory and otherkin, like, those kind of, like, my body is human, but my soul is insert animal here.
Yeah, and, like, I think that could all be happening.
Right.
But I want to talk about how to do it.
Right. The
how
nuts
to
and
practically,
bolts.
tangibly live
Yeah.
it. Because the person who is the Therian, and the person who is the vampire, and the person who is the animekin, and the person who is DID, all of them need to eat.
Yeah. Like, no matter what backstory comes with the soul, spirit, entity, whatever, that's, like, showing up, it's still a human body. it's still, like, you can't... Anytime I think of otherkin or Therians, I just think of this whole post that I saw, like, forever and ever ago about how Dragonkin were upset that they couldn't just chew their crystals.
Okay.
So, that kind of stuff. I mean, there are, like... At this point, there's so many things that you can do to help encourage, like, that side of yourself. But at the same time, you just have to think about the practical things. Like, if someone's got a day job, you can't just be like, oh, I want to indulge in my fae self and just, like, you know, fuck off and frolic in the woods for a week.
Yeah. Your face self is going to have to arrange for somebody else to come in for your day job.
You know, if I steal a couple of names, I can sell those and make money. And I'm sure the landlord's not going to mind if, you know, rent's late.
That's the thing, is that you've got to have people who understand the reality that you're occupying.
Right.
Like, the people who occupy you, they have to understand the reality that they're occupying, and they have to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may find that even though they say they're taking it seriously, they can't yet.
Yes.
So, like, you know, we've got a few people in our group who are kind of in training zone right now.
Right.
They don't really come up a whole lot, and when they do, it's sort of supervised.
Right. Like, I mean, we... On some level, like, I feel like it's... I've been around a lot of, like, parents who are raising kids in this generation with, like, the such easy access to, like, phones and shit, and, like, payment being so digital and stuff, that, like, it's like having to supervise a preteen in some cases, because they may not be able to connect to your prefrontal cortex, or they're trying to use whatever they have in their own brain as prefrontal cortex and their decision-making abilities. And they don't understand that if they press this button to, like, skip to the next level, that you just paid $1.99.
It's interesting. That's very interesting. So, yeah, you can have... Wow. So I spent so much of my time being, like, an older person in... like a very young person's body due to the experience that I described. So the brain difference.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing, because, like, my experience was very time shifty. So sometimes I ended up in, you know, a single digit Felix while I was a 30s Edward.
Yeah.
And that can get very awkward. So the thing is, if you're in someone who has a different brain than you originally do, which in Felix, that's all the time. There's certain allowances you have to make for. If you're coming from a physical body, which most of you will be, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a physical body.
I really hope you do. If you've lost yours, please let us know. We'll put up a like reward if found.
Like, I don't. For all I know, someone's figured out how to not have one of those, and good on you. Live the dream. But yeah, I'm coming from a physical body, and that one has the brain that, you know, I usually live in, and I can do a lot of stuff in that one. So can kind of allow for the lack of prefrontal cortex whenever I'm occupying somebody who doesn't have the full prefrontal cortex. Now, the thing is, if you suddenly isekai into a 5-year-old for an afternoon because maybe God wanted you to save that 5-year-old's life, then while you're in that 5-year-old, you can't smoke cigarettes, Edward.
They're not going to let you have the matches.
Oh, man. I don't know exactly how old he was, but I did actually get him caught smoking.
Oh, no.
I just plain did not remember I was in a young
You
person.
made a single-digit Felix smoke?
I did.
I have not heard this. This
He
is a
doesn't-
podcast exclusive.
He doesn't remember it, and I think that it may be data expunged.
No.
Have you noticed that he can't really smoke tobacco cigarettes?
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason.
Oh, no.
He had to have tried it at some point. And why would he have done that?
Edward.
It's because I didn't know. Like, sometimes I would dream or something.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of early on in my learnings that I needed to be really careful with Felix. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I think at some point I thought I was dreaming.
Yeah.
And so, like...
And that's the thing is, like, a lot of the times these contacts, like, on either end, it kind of feels very dreamlike. And, like, it's very easy to assume dream logic. Which means that, like, you know, nothing bad would happen if you decide to just fuck around. Or, like, you know...
If you just start to notice that there are consequences in your dreams, or that from dream to dream it's remaining the same in a lot of ways, you might want to entertain that in your dreams you're doing something like
Right.
I've been talking about. And I want you to feel okay with yourself about this. Because a lot of people can really freak out. Like, what if I do
Yeah.
the wrong thing in this other person's body? It's not like one of those shows.
Like... I don't want to say hypnotism rules where it's like you can't do anything that like you like don't want to do.
Because of course we know that's a fake rule.
I mean, we've already shown that single digits Felix apparently decided that smoking was okay because of the brain, because of this like Edward that was driving. But like you're more likely like it's more if you hit disrupt in the moral ethical center, you know, or even just the like afraid of consequences center of the brain. You might just get booted out, you know, and just the dream rolls on to something else. But if you're serious about staying connected, like not just noticing that when you're in that dream state, but also trying to figure out the connective tissue, like basically what's going on, what's the time period like, what's, you know, what's the common like story threads, or like even just, you know, any kind of continuity.
I actually think that what you're talking about would be similar to so the questionnaire that Venom invented for time travel. When you show up somewhere that refreshes your own identity. This would be the opposite questionnaire of understanding the identity of the body you're in.
Right.
Like, okay, I am in a brain right now. It's in this body. This person's legal name is this. The date is this.
Right.
The location is this. Their status of marriage, relationships, job, like
Schooling.
What's important to them.
Yeah.
What's important to them in the next 24 hours. What has happened important in the last week.
Yeah.
Things like that are really good to think about. Like, don't panic or anything. Usually, if you show up randomly in a body for the first time, I guarantee you that body has had somebody else in it before.
Oh, yeah.
And it's probably already used to this.
Oh, yeah.
So let the body inform you, first of all. Look for what we've been calling Post-it notes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe Post-it notes?
So, Post-it notes, I mean, it's some people call them note cards, some people call them notes, but it's basically any kind of internal signaling where it's like, I mean, my body in particular is very keen to explain mechanical things. Like, we got a new electronic recently that we've been using a lot, and every entity, spirit, person that I've channeled since we got it, because it was right around Christmas time, and it's been several months now, has mentioned that like the body is very eager to explain, like, okay, this is how many times you have to click this button to change this setting, you know, this is what you do with this is how you clean it, you know, and that's more of like a manual than a post-it note, but like it all starts out with basically, I can tell you more. Just imagine a little clippy inside this head.
I think so. You're describing, like the body usually has manuals. So like whenever I first switch into this body, when I first come in,
you're talking about those kind of Post-it notes.
Yeah.
So basically, that's more of a deliberate system. When you're starting to realize that there's more than one occupant in this body, you start leaving little notes like, "Hey, haven't fed cats yet," or "We're low. I just started a pot of coffee," or
bacon's in the oven.
Bacon's in the oven. Things like that, where it's like, this is what you need to be aware of in the next 5 minutes to an hour.
Yeah. And sometimes it's kind of like ongoing things. Like, we're dissociating a lot today.
Yeah.
Hey! So...
Hey!
Nos and Vos.
Yes.
Let's crack open this cask.
So, this is something that we have been using for years and years and years now. When even before, like, we started getting serious about the fact that these are other people and not just like brain creating like personalities within our own head. Because
like Felix has always been a spiritual person, so he was always channeling people.
Right.
The entire time you've known him.
Right.
So you needed these structures.
Right. So it's based on Spanish nosotros and vosotros, which is basically we as a collective is nosotros, and you as a collective, excluding, the speaker, is vosotros.
Yeah.
And so it's basically a collective pronoun that is very helpful. Basically, if it's like, I'm saying I have this opinion, it is clear that it is me, Tyler, who is speaking. If I say Nos believes or Nos thinks, that means that the collective who are usually in this brain and in this body agree on this.
Yeah, and I don't want to make it too much of a voting capacity, but it's like, for instance, I'm going to talk about a real rotation that's been happening recently.
Cool.
So I've been in here. In here means Felix's body.
Yes.
I've been in here. Felix has been in here. Venom has been in here. Mantis has been in here a bit. Umbra has been in here. And so that's not everybody, but it's a general rotation.
That's
and
who's been like consistently showing up to do regular chores, not just for like special occasions.
Well, we might call somebody over to like answer a question or do something very specific, but basically this group of people recently, we've all been passing a baton of thought.
Yeah.
In Felix's body.
Right.
And so when I say, Nos has been thinking recently, that basically means that in this brain, the group of people who have been in the brain have been passing these thoughts around.
Imagine
examining
it like
them.
a whiteboard.
Yeah.
Or like notepad or something where you're all just jotting your notes in the same place.
Yeah, and so there's kind of like with the brain, you'll find that there's like a kind of collective zone where you can put the thoughts. Collective memory, and it's a lot easier to access that and share it. And then there's going to be stuff that's sort of in your zone of thought, and it's a lot harder for other people to access it, but it's probably easier for you to do it.
And when you're earlier on in this kind of like collaborative stuff, what is public versus what is private may surprise you.
Yeah, it's you're going to be creating this as you go. The brain it is plastic, and it creates its own thoughts as they are made, and the tissues themselves write that, and it like
right.
So it's a sandcastle building itself. The thing is, like, as you start to build more thoughts that are similar, the brain's like, oh, now that I've made about 5 of these, I get how I should be doing them all the time. And that means that the first 5 that you made, or it's like the first 3 pancakes that you make.
You're trying to get used to the pan.
Yeah. Every single time you make pancakes, the first 3 pancakes you make are kind of like, I get to eat these. No one else wants them.
I will not inflict them on anyone else. Yeah.
And so, yeah, the first 5 thought pancakes you make are going to be shaped kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that your stuff might be in a few different places in the brain than you expect. Public versus private thought.
Yes.
Expect it all to be public. Like,
Yeah.
it's not your body. Just expect that it's a public bathroom. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. And I really think that, like, understanding that you're not the only one in there, so you can't just do whatever the fuck you want. A lot of, like, stuff that we've set up, Nos and Vos, or if we want to say everyone together, Vos Nos, basically are set up on, like, common courtesies. We don't try to dig in each other's, like, memories and stuff. And the more that we make this accessible, and the more that we make it, like, normalized, and the more that we actually accommodate for this, the easier it's been. Like, having the trinkets that we do to identify who is fronting or, like, talking or whatever. We do borrow a lot of terms from the DID, other king community, because it's the best terms that we've found for a lot of this stuff. So, like, fronting, coming in, those kind of things are more of the DID terms. But basically, any of the stuff that we've used just helps make it easier to communicate. Like, the fact that I can look over at Edward and look at a couple of things that he has and know that it's him.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier than trying to be like, oh crap, I gotta, like, remember every time I see this person to ask who is, up front or fronting, to make sure that I don't offend anyone.
So what's fun about that is that if you look at someone, you can often tell who's in them.
Yes.
Now, that takes effort
It
to
takes
always be doing.
Effort, and it also takes familiarity.
Yeah, you have to actually know. But it is something that can happen. I do want to mention that, because if you think you're being sneaky all the time, I would say, like, make sure to go look in the mirror every now and then. It's very easy for the hair to flip up into various places that you're not really expecting. Just, like, tidy up. Go make sure that you actually know what you're working with, because you might be in, like, a way different body than you expect.
Right.
If you're never gonna show up in the same kind of body that, like, you came out of. Like, there's gonna be something different. And, like, when it comes to the body that I'm in, like, I'm in a trans man's body, and I've been in this trans man's body, like, since he's been, like, a little trans boy. So I understand that pretty well.
Yeah.
But, like, only because I've had this much experience with Felix do I think, like, I'm, like, I feel like if I hadn't had this much experience with, like, Felix, then I, like, wouldn't be this familiar with handling a trans body.
Yeah, because you're coming from a cis male body.
Yeah, my body is cis male. And, like, I think towards the beginning, it was very off-putting, but, like, that would have been with any kid.
Yeah.
And since, like, I kind of understood Felix's growing up, like, I don't know. By the time that it really mattered, I'd already kind of gotten accustomed to it.
Right.
But, like, you're going to end up in someone with a completely different life experience than yours.
Yeah.
And so the thing about memory is when you land in there, there's actually quite a lot you can access.
Yes.
It'll be very random what it seems comes up on its own. Let the body provide some things. Like, go ahead and, like, you can just kind of make an inward thought. Be like, hey, body, I'm new here. Don't know what's going on. What would you prefer I know? How do you prefer I talk to you?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the body will send some thoughts to you in response. Sometimes the body might write some things in response. Sometimes you might glance at some text that just happens to say what the body would want to say to you. All kinds of things. The subconscious will usually speak for the body. So you get a lot of really interesting ways that it interacts with you, and it may not have had a whole lot of other people interact with it before, so it may learn to kind of communicate with you as you communicate with it.
Right.
And like it's always very interesting having that dialogue, but it's very, very worth it. A lot of people who do this kind of work either come from it from the mindset or are taught that you should treat it like a racehorse.
Yeah.
And instead you should treat it like it's your body that you have forever.
Yeah.
And like, don't assume that this is your last time in there. If you land there once, you are so much more likely to land there again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's just a matter of, like, familiarity, and, like, resonance, I guess, is a way to put it. But yeah, just basically understanding the norms, and if you have a partner or someone else who can help, it makes it so much easier if you trust them.
Yes.
That's the thing, is that you really have to trust, like...
If your partner doesn't know and you can't trust them with this information, I'm really sorry.
It's rough.
Try to be respectful. Maybe find an analogy. If you can fictionalize and have a character or a role-play character, something like that, try D&D, try, I hate to say it, but something like LARPing. There's all kinds of ways that you can get expression out until you can figure out a better way to do things.
Right. But, like you said, until you can find a better way to do things. Because if you're with someone who isn't willing to understand and you are truly looking into this stuff, it's not... I'm going to come out and say it. If they don't try to understand it themselves, it's not worth it to try to make them understand.
I will say... Give it time. Because like it's difficult for some people to reach these concepts. I'm just saying, like, quickly.
If they're not willing to even entertain the idea.
Oh yeah.
Then it's like, if they're not willing to take the first step, where it's like, if you just are like, hey, I don't know if this is DID or what, but can we just actually talk about like what your opinions are on DID otherkin? Just opening up the topic. If they're not even like willing to open up about it, or if their opinions about it are not lining up, you're not going to change their mind.
And
it's a rough reality.
Yeah. I really hope you find this out before you commit to a long-term relationship.
Yes.
I will say, if you haven't committed to a long-term relationship yet, you need to consider this as part of your long-term relationship. If you can't talk about this kind of stuff in a long-term relationship, it's going to be very difficult for you, because you're going to be hiding it from the person you're supposed to be closest with. Actively hiding it all the time. And they may translate that as you cheating or something.
Yes.
Like, it will come across like something totally different than you mean it to. And how the hell would they ever assume that you body swap with someone randomly?
Right.
And that's why you act like that.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the other side of this. If you are a person with a body and other people start showing randomly up in you, that's a thing you experience. Sometimes you are no longer there, and then you come back and someone else has been there and they did stuff while you were gone. Because I also experienced this on my own end of reality. Like, I was over here, Felix was over there.
Exactly.
You gotta be somewhere.
Yep.
You gotta be somewhere.
Now, bringing memories back to your original body is a crapshoot.
It's a moving goalpost. So it really depends a lot on what I would call the astrology weather, and also the body weather. And don't feel pressured to bring over anything in particular, because everybody's norms for how they import this is a little different. Felix has an experience where randomly he will just start getting a cognizance of what happened, and almost like a playback of the scene, but he'll be doing it like he'll get it while he's going to walk to get the groceries or something.
And it could be like up to a month later.
Yeah.
Like it's I experience a certain sort of linearity with my own cognizance. I mean, sometimes I do just end up with a blank and things aren't like really filled in until later. But like with Felix, it's so consistent. He will not be here. I will telepathically talk to him where he is, wherever he is. And then he comes back into his body like 30 minutes later. Doesn't remember any of it. Doesn't know where he was. Doesn't remember any of the telepathic conversation that we had. I can tell him stuff that he told me and he'll just look at me with a completely blank face. And then suddenly 2.5 weeks later he'd be like, you know the thing that you were talking about like 2.5 weeks ago that you said that I remember it all now.
Yeah. And y'all have had to deal with the methane over the last few months, so you've also had a lot of time displacement because of that.
It's even out of methane. It's still...
Is it always about that time? Like about that time shift?
The shift is different depending on...
That's what I think the methane may be responsible for.
Well, no, I don't think it's just the methane.
Just the methane, okay.
Not just the methane.
Cool.
I think some of it is just based on, like, physical distance.
Interesting.
Like, he is more affected by physical distance than I think a lot of psychics account for.
Okay, so, like, physical distance from the destination?
Well, where his soul, spirit, whatever is, away from his physical body.
Okay, yeah. So, affected by speed of light?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's extremely interesting. And
this is another part of the reason why having someone that you can trust and that you can talk to about this stuff, especially if they're also... experimenting or looking into parallel or even the same area is very important, because then you can just talk openly about this.
Like, he's never made that correlation.
Right.
Like, I don't think... It's a little bit hard for his head to figure that, to be quite honest.
Because he's experiencing it.
Yeah, and also it's like that kind of calculation is the very kind that his lobe doesn't do.
Yes.
So, double pronged.
Right. But, like... things like this, having these kind of conversations, I feel like is very important. And like, I mean, this is the whole reason why we started this podcast in the first place, is to be able to publicly talk about this stuff that we've been talking about in private for years. Because like, it's occulted.
It is. And like, I think that us talking about it demonstrates that it's not dangerous.
No.
I think if someone can have a whole conversation about it on a podcast and just have all these like kind of reasonable concerns, questions, just go through this logically.
Yeah.
I think that demonstrates like this isn't it there's this idea that if it's a cult that it's just gonna like make people act all crazy as soon as they attempt it.
Yes. And like, I do want to get into some of the like stereotypes like at some point about some of the stuff where it's like what is said to happen if you dabble in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so like, I mean, when we had the methane around, I was around during methane times as well. I experienced that. We did experience a lot of the very stereotypical circumstances.
Yeah.
Actually, and I feel like that might explain a few things, that a lot of people only experience this when they're also experiencing that.
Yeah. Because, like, honestly, I've had a few entities that do tend towards violence in this body, and the only time that I have not been able to, like, this body has not been able to restrain them is when the methane was so bad that I was literally not able to restrain myself.
And what's interesting is that you basically were able to treat an area of the house like a rage room that was going to be renovated anyway.
Yes.
And so I want to clarify the violence part. You just happened to have that part of yourself come up, or I don't want to call part of yourself, but you had someone come up who needed to get out some physical violence at the same time as you had a disposable, wreckable area.
Right.
And it turned out to work out very well. It even turned out very good that there were ventilation holes in the walls in that area because of all the methane stuff. Like, I can't tell you just how much this actually just worked out.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, if you're like thinking, man, this never happens to me and I have no idea what it's like, how do I start doing this? I'm not exactly sure how you start doing this because I've always been doing this.
Yeah.
This has always been happening to me. But if you haven't always had this happen to you, consider the things that we've been talking about as things that you will have to actually take precautions against.
Definitely.
If you have weird shit happen to you and you just happen to make it through pretty good all the time, then it sounds like you might be cut out for this. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, like, you know, consider you're gonna basically have the life of an isekai anime protagonist. Like, one of the ones that gets beat up more.
Oh, God.
And, like, you know, you have to... By the way, you're basically getting isekai'd each time, and you have to deal with just being a vending machine, if that's what you end up being.
Oh, my God.
There's that one where there's a vending machine.
No.
But seriously, like, you end up with the stat sheet, with the character sheet that you're given.
Right.
And you have to take it seriously every time.
Definitely. So... Thank you so much, Edward.
I went on and on. I'm so sorry.
Fun. We're gonna have to have you back for a part 2.
Oh boy! Yay!
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I feel like we haven't gotten into some of the topics that like I'd really like to get into, so we're definitely gonna have to do a part 2. So
great! I would love that.
Yeah.
I will see y'all next time then.
Thank you so much for showing up.
Okay, I will escort myself out and Felix back in.
Yes.
Ciao, everyone.
Bye. So, Edward's getting Felix to come back over. Red Rover, make Felix come over. You know, send Edward that away. But yeah, part of the body stuff, like, I would like to get into a little bit more of the nuts and bolts about the trinkets. Like, not details or anything, but a bit more about it and, like, things like that when it comes to body stuff, but that will definitely have to be another episode. But yay, Felix has returned. He's centering. He's doing the rest of his 3 steps. You heard step 1 already. A lot of whistles. So.
Oh boy, he's excited.
Yes, he's very excited. We're going to be doing a part 2. So
he kind of left a big "I'm excited" post-it note to explain the body chemicals he left me with.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But, anyways, trying to think. Is there anything else you want to say to sort of wrap it up? I feel like Edward sort of left at a good place to sort of wrap up the whole episode. So.
Okay. Well,
I mean. You've got Peacock Planet.
Peacock Planet is at a very interesting place.
Yes.
As a psychic who is doing a psychic webcomic, we are having a psychic event occur.
Yes.
And I invite you to come to peacockplanet.tumblr.com and witness it yourself.
We are working on page navigation.
Yes. And there's a link at the top to allow you to view it chronologically.
Right.
So, I think it's a pretty good viewing experience. And, otherwise, we're going to be continuing at this. I'm so excited that Edward is coming back.
I'm so glad. I mean, we've had to delay it a little bit, but I'm so glad that we finally got into this and we're going to have a part 2. So, other places that you can find us, badoccultadvice.tumblr.com is where we post all our random Tumblr bullshit. You can send us an ask there, or you can send us an email at badoccultadvice@gmail.com. And yeah.
YouTube.com/
Bad Occult
at
Advice.
Bad Occult Advice, I think.
No.
Is it just Bad Occult Advice?
Just Google Bad Occult Advice YouTube. It's going to be the first link.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're here on Twitch. So yeah, this has been another episode of Bad Occult Podcast, where we do, or at least we have talked about inadvisable things in the main magical science. As always, I have been and will continue to be Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
I am currently Felix S. Warren.
May change in the future. And we will see you on the next episode.